Hey, good afternoon, all. We're pleased to have you attend The Future of Managed Cybersecurity is Now, presented by Highwire Networks. My name is Ryan Harrison, and I hold the special role here at Highwire as Senior Cybersecurity Manager. Today, I have the distinct honor of moderating this breakout session, Identity, the First Line of Defense, featuring David Barton, the CTO of Highwire, and Michael Roth, the CEO of Evo Security. Before we get into introductions and contents, I'd just like to make a couple notes. This session will be recorded and made available to all the attendees after the conference. We also will be taking questions throughout the presentation, so please feel free to ask questions. There may be a ton of questions coming in. Don't worry, we'll get those answered one way or another, even if we need to circle back after the session has ended. So at this point, I'd like to let David and Michael make their introductions. David, by now, I'm sure if any of our attendees have made any of the previous breakout sessions, they've heard your introduction. But as a formality, David, if you would mind giving us just a brief introduction, and then Michael, as soon as David's done, you can go ahead and make your introduction as well.
Yeah, happy to do it. I'm Dave Barton, CTO, Highwire Networks. Susanna informed me after the keynote that I failed to tell people who I was. I just jumped right into conversation. The content was more important than the person who was coordinating, so I didn't mind. Mike, appreciate you joining us. We value the partnership with Evo. The one thing, Ryan, we didn't talk to yet is we do have some prizes that we will be pulling at the end of the show. So keep an eye on your inbox because we'll be working on that. But I think the most important thing is we want everybody to get as much out of this session as we can. I see we've got 33 folks in the audience right now. So if you have questions for myself, for Mike, for Ryan, for any of us, please put them in, right? Because we want you to get as much out of this idea around identity and multi-factor authentication and some of the things we're going to talk to today. But please enter them because Mike and I, we talk a lot and we'll talk all day. And what we really want to do is hear from you, not from us. So Mike, you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. We're also really excited about the partnership with Highwire. It's been really phenomenal to work with you and your team for the last almost a year now. So pumped about this. So basically, I'm Mike Roth. I'm the CEO and founder of Evo Security. So basically what we do is we protect small to medium businesses from the most common and destructive form of cyber attacks with an identity and access management solution. And we engineered this top to bottom for IT providers to administer to their SMB customers. It's the first time that we know of that anybody's done that. So it's been a great ride so far, and we're really excited about what we have coming in the future.
Great. Thanks for that introduction, Mike. So I guess going ahead and getting started, my first question to you, Michael, is a lot of people, in today's age, hacking is not this mysterious thing that happens in the closets and in the shadows. It's very public these days. In fact, it seems like you can't turn on any news segment that does not reference some type of cybersecurity attack. What are the actual facts, especially as it pertains to IT providers and different SMB customers and businesses?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's changed a lot in the last really 5 years, and most certainly in the last 2 years. So before, you'd hear these headlines, and you would kind of get this imagery like it was some Ocean's 11 style hack that someone has executed to a large corporation, and it made the news. But today, what's really troubling, and why we're seeing more and more reports about this, is that anybody can really learn how to be a hacker or a cyber criminal. It's actually a business. So in the same way that you can go online and take a class to learn how to build a website, you could actually go to the deep and dark web and buy a database of passwords that have already been stolen by somebody else. You can learn how to hack online. You can buy tools.
There's YouTube channels for it, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, this is a full-on business, and so your neighbor can become a hacker, and it doesn't take much effort. And as a result of that, what we've seen, guys, is that especially since the pandemic, I'm sure you've seen it too, is that there've been a lot of reports that come out that hacking in general has increased well over 600% since the pandemic. So I think the most troubling part for us, especially because we focus our business on helping the small to medium business by providing, by enabling their IT provider in a new and enhanced way, that almost 40 to 50% of all the attacks now are targeting the small to medium business. And so what's really happening, if you think about it, it's kind of like the common thief that goes around a parking lot in a grocery store or something at night and starts popping door handles and see, who left their door open. And that's really where a lot of this activity is. And
so, Mike, do you see that as a function of skill or investment? My perspective is big companies have lots of guards and guns and gates.
Yeah.
And the mid-market SMB less so. Is that consistent with what you're seeing as well?
It is. Yeah, exactly. And I think I have in a couple of slides, I have a really good way to kind of like reframe that thought and really drive home the point that, whether you're big or you're small, it really doesn't matter. In fact, if you're small, it's actually now perhaps even more attractive because they know that maybe you're not thinking about stuff in the same way that the larger corporations are. And yeah.
So two stories I'll share here. One is I live in Tennessee, and there's a dental office by my house that has 6 chairs, and they got ransomwared.
Yeah.
Right. So why are they going after a dentist office? Well, they don't have investment. They don't have security people, and they've got something that bad guys want outside of money, which is they took their data. They took all their customer patient data. Right. So there's incentive. 2, a couple of years ago, I had an opportunity to travel to China and spent 2 weeks there. And let me tell you, the first week is awesome. And then after that, you're ready to go home. That's just my opinion. But in my 2 weeks, we had an opportunity to drive by this compound, and the gentleman I was with says that's where all the hacking happens. And I'm like, help me understand what you're talking about. We in America, we see hacking as a bad thing, right? Because we hear about it on the nightly news, to Ryan's point, all day. There's bad stuff happening everywhere we go. Yeah. In China, they are state sponsored, meaning they have a facility, guys, that is 3 stories tall where the hackers live. They live in a compound protected by guards and guns and gates. They bring them food. They bring them companions. And I'll leave it at that. They bring them everything they need, and the hackers live there all day, every day. And they work there. And their job is to do nothing more than what Bob Bigman talked about this morning, than to steal our stuff, to steal our data, to steal our intellectual property. It is organized in a way that we, in the mid-market SMB space, we can't begin to defend. It's impossible to defend by ourselves. Mm-hmm. And identity is one of the key ways we can help solve this problem. And those are my 2 anecdotal stories I'll throw in there for now.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to think that, you have, in the same way that our government employs people like, at the IRS, for example, who, they work there, that's their job. China and Russia and others are employing people to hack other people.
That's right.
And so it's pretty wild when you think about that. But at the same time, the same tools that they're using can be picked up by, the common hacker down the street in your neighborhood too. So it's they're causing these giant hacks, but then also enabling other people to be able to execute the same giant hacks.
That's right. I agree.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say, that, these nation state attackers are very significant in the enterprise space. And I'm not saying they don't target these SMBs and mid-tier, but you're talking about a ton of investment made for one thing only, and that is to get inside an organization, in most cases, to steal that data, to bring that data back home, sell it on black markets, use it for political reasons, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, the significance here when we start looking at SMBs is that, because of the lack of investment in security, these, the script kiddies, the people that do just go and download, those things that wouldn't make it past your first layer of defense in an enterprise, a larger enterprise with multi-million-dollar investments in IT security, are just wreaking havoc on these small to medium businesses.
Absolutely.
So, as we kind of talk about that, that I think, I think that kind of leads us into kind of the next slide, which is, it's not necessarily always this big orchestrated effort, right? So, Michael, could you talk just a little bit about what you've seen from your perspective around what are cyber criminals actually doing?
Yeah, when we prior to launching the company, I had to ask that question myself and figure out and really explore what is truly happening. What is the process? And because it helps us understand how do we build a better product and a better solution and work with SMBs and managed service providers in order to create a really incredible solution. And there are really two methods that they're using, two primary methods, is when it pertains to the login. And I would say, just as a precursory understanding, the vast majority of all the hacks and the breaches that are going on right now, somebody breaches a login. Somebody figures out it was either a poor password, which we'll talk about here in a second, or they didn't have MFA or any type of identity and access management, which MFA is a subset of. So the first method is one that's been around for a while, but now anybody can do this at scale, and it's called brute force attacking. Basically, a cyber criminal or your neighbor down the street can go online. They could buy tools. They could deploy bots. They can automate all those bots at scale. And just to give you a crazy example, I was watching a video not that long ago by one of the premier white hat hackers in the world, and he was saying that if you buy 3 to 4 GPUs, you can hack 40 billion passwords per second. Think about that. That is an absurd number, right? So it doesn't matter how many small to medium businesses are out there. If they have the data or the information to go and target these small to medium businesses, they could do it automatically at scale without even touching anything. And inevitably what they find is there's going to be an easy target. Somebody's going to have a poor password and they're not going to have MFA, and they will breach that login. And when they breach that login, they'll get into whether it was a network or an application or whatever the system is. And they'll lock that down, and they'll say, okay, you cannot get into this anymore unless you pay me, 3 Bitcoin. But
right.
The problem now is that the payouts for that used to be averaging around 10 grand. Now they're up to about $250,000. So, if you're an SMB, you have to ask yourself, do you have $250,000 cash on hand? If someone steals your stuff, is that going to destroy your business, and can you afford it? So this is the first method that they do.
So you mentioned poor passwords. So reasonably, one would ask, is it just poor passwords? Is it just bad, poorly created, some of the more popular poor passwords are involve the word password in it. Like right now, summer 2021 is probably on the top 10 most used passwords. So is it just a poor password creation, problem? Is that the easy way for these hackers to take advantage?
Yeah, it's a combination. It's that it starts with that, but ultimately, if you have multi-factor authentication and other identity and access management solution in place, it doesn't matter really what your password is. It just shuts it down. So what can happen though is even if you have the strongest password in the world, that could be 50 characters long. The second method that cyber criminals use is called social engineering. And basically, you've probably heard about this and you've seen it, where they say, okay, you know what? I couldn't break into these SMBs over here because they had a pretty decent password and it was kind of difficult. So I'm going to kind of move on to some easier targets. But in parallel, there's just one or two or three SMBs that I think they're really interesting. I'm going to go try and phish them, is what it's called. It's spelled PHISH. Basically, it's a way for them to, they already have your email address. So they'll send you an email with something that's going to look like it was maybe associated with your business, or maybe it was something generic like a Microsoft Office 365 email, but it's actually not, or something like that. And as soon as that employee clicks on that link, and then it'll take them somewhere. And the worst case scenario is that they say, hey, you need to tell us, you need to re-enter your password here because, your administrator said to do it. Well, then they just grab your password right there and it's game over. And so it doesn't even matter how long your password was. At that point, they got you, they can log in, and then they just conduct the same process. They'll hold that application or network or system for ransom, and they won't give it back to you until you pay them. And sometimes they don't give it back at all, and which is really bad. But this method right here is the most successful effort that they make. They actually breach more logins with social engineering than they do with brute force attacks.
Any thoughts on why that is?
I think it comes down to bots. The bots that they run are fairly binary, so it's just trying to hammer that login and find the easy targets. But people are susceptible to stuff. They're busy. They're if it looks normal, okay, well, I trust this. This came from, it kind of looks like other things look. Or maybe you're just kind of in passing and it just slips your mind. You click that link real fast and maybe you didn't mean to, and boom, you're targeted.
Okay.
So, this is where kind of, employee awareness starts to enter the picture. And, again, if you have identity and access management, though, this just gets shut down. So,
Mike, shifting gears a little bit here, because one of the things that we kind of started talking about was, kind of specifically around SMBs and one of the biggest questions that I know that I hear is, well, are we, should we really be worried? We're a small business. We're not a dentist office. We don't have any, public health or personal health information, any privileged information, or sensitive, we don't have a lot of money. We don't hold state secrets. I'm just a mom and pop shop, selling fishing lures out of my basement. So what is, from a side, and I think we briefly touched on it when we talked about just kind of these spray and pray style attacks, but what do attackers really think about that? I mean, are they, does it really matter to them, or are they looking to just get a foothold in anything that they can possibly get a foothold in?
Yeah, that's another really great question. And I think there's a very large misconception out there about what hackers actually do care about. And again, this has changed really rapidly. dramatically. I mean, I'm talking within the last 3 or 4 years or less, this whole mentality for a hacker has shifted dramatically. And that goes back to how easy it is for them to find the tools and other information to start initiating hacks. But yeah, we've heard many times that, hey, look, I'm to your point, I'm too small for a hacker to care. Why? I mean, I don't have anything that they want. But unfortunately, there was a massive shift, especially with the pandemic, caused it to accelerate pretty rapidly. It's not about how much or what you have, but it's about how much you're willing to pay in order to get back what you lost. And they know that. And they know that people do pay because they panic and they just need their company back. You know, imagine if it was a network and you have all of your employees' information, all of your billing information, all of your customer information, and they're able to hold all that hostage. Well, you really don't have a business anymore, right? So your livelihood as a business owner, the livelihoods of all your employees, maybe you have 5, maybe you have 25 employees or whatever it might be. But now you've jeopardized all of that. And also then going back to, you know, do you have roughly $250,000 to pay out of pocket to get that back? So,
well, and Mike, I just wanted to add in, we've seen recently where the ransomware perpetrators are pulling your financial records. They're pulling your insurance policy to figure out how much insurance they'll pay. And they're asking you for more than what your insurance company will pay. And they're basing that off of your bank statement. So they know how much you have. They know how much you're covered for. And they're saying, hey, we want, you know, you got 100,000 in cash, you got 100,000 in insurance. We want 300,000, or we want 200 to get both. And
yeah,
you know, it's amazing. It's scary, frankly, but they know exactly how much to ask for, right? Because they know what you can pay. And so, you know, that's part one for and I'm gonna plug this for. We're doing a podcast next week on cyber insurance and how much cyber insurance and what are the implications. And we've got Thomas Wetzel and Associates. He'll be our guest. But if you want to hear more about the future of cyber insurance and where it's going, you should join us because it's tied into all of these things we're talking about right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in fact, a lot of cyber. That's a great comment because we're actually working with some cyber insurance companies as well. They're actually requiring your company, if you don't have identity and access management in place, then they won't insure you. So IAM and MF and into the subsets of that, MFA and SSO and privileged access management, which is all, you know, IAM, has become as baseline and standard today as, you know, antivirus, firewall, you know, all the common stuff that's been around. But I see there's a question here. It said, isn't it more than your business? Aren't you legally responsible to protect your employees and your clients' data? Yeah, as a small business, that is your responsibility. So in theory, you could also, I mean, it would not be a far stretch to say like, hey, look, you're running this small business and this is how I feed my family. You're employing me, but you're not protecting us in the ways that you have. And now we have to shut this business down. And maybe there's a lawsuit there, right? I mean, a disgruntled employee, that's not out of the question.
Well, not just that, we've got employee data for everybody who's part of our company. Right. So, Mike, I know your kids, I know your wife, your family, your blood type. I know all that in theory, right? Because you work for me. You don't, but I'm just hypothetical. So sure. I've got a responsibility to take care of that data. So that question. The next question was about preventing access. I think the best practice there, Stacy asked the question, is keep some of your data separate from others. So your policy statements, don't store them next to your insurance or your financial records, right? We talked this morning in the earlier about having offline backups. Well, there's probably some data you don't want available on your network. You want to store it someplace else. So if you can put controls to keep those things separate from each other, then you're reducing your risk.
Yeah.
And I'd like to just add in, just to piggyback on that, again, it's this whole breakout session is around securing the identity. And so, without adequate protections in place, I would argue that it may not even necessarily matter where your sensitive documents are being stored if you're not protecting the access to those documents. If you don't have necessary identity protections in place, anyone can, just like we're showing, I love the graphic on the slide around passwords and how easy it is to crack certain passwords these days. But I think to David's point, it's about separation of sensitive information, and it's also about protecting the entry points to how you would access that information as well, i.e. the identity. Great question.
Yeah, really good question. Yeah. I think the last point that I'd like to make here is, kind of going back to the password part of that. And to your point, Ryan, about, protecting these, access points for cyber criminals. Oftentimes we'll think about, hey, if I have a long password, then, I'm good. Right. And, going back to the brute force attack versus the brute force attack will get all those passwords you see there in purple and red. They'll get those instantaneously. But once you get into that yellow kind of orange section here where, you have maybe like a 10 character password that has special characters, uppercase, lowercase numbers, that's where the social engineering starts to come in. And so what's cool about identity access management is once you install it and deploy it, and we'll show you what we mean by that. Ryan, if you can click next, it just shuts down everything. So it really doesn't matter anymore. And so that's the power of MFA, SSO, privilege access management, is it kind of nullifies this problem and basically everything that we've talked about to date. And so it's a very simple way to provide a very, very powerful protection for your company.
So shifting gears just a little bit here. So we understand the problem. We're talking about some of the common things that are happening, both from the company side of maybe not having the adequate protections, or and then the threat actor side of just being able to just take advantage of either weak passwords or just simply tricking end users into giving their information away with extremely well-crafted phishing messages, I might add. We've seen the complexity and just the overall, I lost my train of thought here, but the complexity of these phishing messages and authenticity, just the overall authenticity of these phishing messages have just come so far since they, So social engineering is not a new concept. It's been going on, it's been going on for ages. But what we see is just these really complex, really hard to spot phishing messages. I imagine that as a small business, one of the things that I'd like to kind of point out and ask about is, we talk about password strength, but let's talk about all the different things we're logging into. We've got these days, because especially as we're now remote, we're now leveraging cloud resources. We've got logins to this, we've got logins to that. How exactly are we going to protect, and how do you help us protect all of those different passwords and logins?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is the core value proposition for identity and access management. Basically, exactly to your point is, any small to medium business or organization, you have a bunch of different sort of silos, I guess, if you want to call them. So you're going to have, users, which are going to be all of the people that are employed by that company. each one of those users is probably going to have one or more devices. Could be a phone, could be, a tablet, could be a laptop or a desktop. And then there may or may not be a local network associated with that business. So David, going back to your point about a dentist office or something like that, they usually have a server or something like that in the closet. And then all the other web applications that they're logging into as well. So the way that hackers think about these is they call them attack vectors. And they view each one as a independent way that they can try and breach into that SMB. And so you start to do the math there, like going back to stats class or whatever, and the probability increases more and more and more, the more that they can figure out about your company and what you do have siloed, and their attack surface starts to increase. And so that's where their social engineering and their brute force attacks and other things start to become really powerful. And all of the logins associated with all of that become vulnerable. But with identity and access management, we very simply just create like an invisible centralized layer where we integrate all of the users, all of the devices, all the networks, and all of the web applications all up into one central location. And we have very, very rigid and strict architectures that we've built specifically at Evo that a lot of other solutions have not built because they're more focused on large enterprise, where we partition all of that data. Everything's encrypted. So and everything for all, if you're an IT provider, all of your small to medium business customers, everything is separated. But within each one of those customers, we've unified all of these silos. That way, identity becomes the invisible layer. And this is the future of what's called zero trust, where you never trust who's trying to log in. You always make them verify. And then once they're in, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, you give them the least amount of privilege possible. And so that's what Evo is. We unify all of that, and we shut down the cyber criminal, we shut down the brute force attack bots, and we shut down the social engineering. So here you were as a company before. It's kind of like, this is your brain, and this is your brain on drugs. This is where you were before, and you have all these potential issues, but with IAM, you very simply just solve them. And we do that with multi-factor authentication. So everybody's probably had to enter the 6-digit code. And then we expand on that with what's called SSO, or single sign-on, which basically means that, okay, hey, look, I've proven my identity. I've logged into this one web application like 10 minutes ago. If I go log into another one, I don't have to do MFA again because I've already proven my identity, and Evo handles all that logic. So we know that it's still you. And so it just makes what would have been like going through airport security, this like really grueling process, and we turn it into, TSA pre-check. So really frictionless type of experience. And then from there, we have privilege access management, and it goes both ways. It's hey, as the small to medium business, you want to know that your IT providers are managing their side of the house, where, if they have 20 people that work for their company, should all of them get access to all of your stuff? Or should only some administrators have access to certain parts? Maybe some are more help desk focused, and maybe some are more kind of like true engineering focused. So we start to assign privileges to administrators and also end users. And then something cool that we wanted to announce today is that we're also building out a password manager. So Evo will actually become a total identity and access management platform, MFA, SSO, privilege access management, and password management, all in one, all seamless, all very cost effective. So this is what identity does, and this is why it's so powerful.
David, any thoughts?
Oh, might be on mute.
Sorry, I was talking to myself. I love the direction. I'm a firm believer that MFA coupled with a PAM solution is very effective in helping reduce impact. Because if you listen to all the other stuff we've talked about, right, it's all about mean time to detection, mean time to response. And if we take away a couple of those vectors, there's less opportunity for them to get in, less for us to detect. And when they do, we have an opportunity to respond quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of times what will happen too is, I'm sure you guys have seen where, depending on the cyber criminal, if they, and you'll hear ethical hackers say this all the time when they're doing like pen tests and trying to understand where your security gaps as a company. If they run across identity access management or MFA or PAM, they typically just move on to the next easy target. It's just too much effort for them, and so it just depends on the cyber criminal. But let's see. It says, there was a question that says, with this information, would your opinion be that the issue has progressed to the point that the lack of IAM or MFA to safeguard your business is criminally negligent? I would love to see that because that would be great for our company. But I do think that we have entered a point where if you're not deploying MFA or identity and access management of some kind, then you're really asking for it. And I don't mean that in like a negative way, but it's not going to be if, it's going to be when. And unfortunately, that's where the world is today. And, the state of Louisiana actually is the first state to pass actual law that says that if you're an IT provider and you are managing any type of information associated with the state government, if you do not have identity and access management, then it's illegal, basically. And so I don't know if that's going to propagate across the country, but there certainly seem to be some stricter compliance kind of rules and regulation. Just as an example, one of the other things that we saw at Evo that's really interesting is if you are an IT provider and you're sharing passwords and MFA codes when you're trying to log into your customers, we've actually solved that problem once and for all. But HIPAA clearly states that if you're sharing passwords and MFA codes, you're out of compliance. And so that puts you in a lot of legal liability. So yeah, certainly this is important. And if you're not doing, then you could potentially qualify, some type of negligence. But I think today it's more about just generating awareness and making sure that people are deploying this properly.
So Mike, you just mentioned that you had actually solved this problem of MSPs potentially sharing passwords and MFA tokens or codes. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could speak on that. I mean, that seems pretty powerful. Just from my experience in the industry, I've seen that. I've always seen that. These shared administrator accounts. Certain vendors only allow a handful of administrators, and so what happens is your entire IT team is just passing back and forth, passwords and then MFA codes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really, really important. This is probably it's a sensitive topic because if I'm a small to medium business, I don't want to find out that my IT provider has been doing that. But at the same time, if I'm an IT provider, I'm doing the best that I can with the tools that are available to me and have been available to me. So I think it was just a matter of, markets maturing and products maturing. And so we wanted to tackle that head on because it's not only a liability for the IT provider or the MSP, but it's also a liability for the SMB. And the unfortunate truth is that a lot of IAM solutions that are out there that are focused on the enterprise, they're not really worried about solving that problem because they're focused on the enterprise. It's one solution for one company, but we've engineered Evo to be one solution for many companies. And so this emerges really quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just briefly for about, a couple of minutes. And you can see what I'm talking about here. And I want to make sure, can everybody see this? Can you guys see the elevated access screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And from a housekeeping, we got about 5 minutes, by the way.
Okay. I'll be quick. So basically, on the left is the process right now that IT administrators have to execute in order to try and not share codes. And usually what they do is they'll share passwords or share MFA codes. They'll around, Slack channels, or maybe there's some kind of vaults and stuff. They'll try and store them in, but still everyone has access. The way that we've built it at Evo is if you're an IT administrator, Evo handles all the heavy lifting that you see on the left and locks it down and makes it really secure. And if you're an IT administrator, you don't even need to know what those things are. You can actually log into your customer as yourself with your own MSP or IT credentials. You get a push notification to your own phone, and then you log into your customer. And that's really powerful because we log all the activity. We know who's doing what. And we've just, solved a problem that's been around for 15 years. So we're actually really excited about launching that.
Yeah, I can say, just from experience, being in a SOC and, chasing these rabbit holes of, the account that performed this action that maybe was unwanted or malicious in nature, was this administrator account. And I met with, 15 people have access to that administrator account. Can you tell us who it is? And I go, well, no, because they're all logging in through the same accounts. So I think that's extremely powerful. That's an extremely powerful feature that you're bringing into the market.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we're pretty excited. It took a lot of really hard engineering, so it wasn't easy.
So while we're kind of on the topic of just, features and value props and differentiators, maybe you could just tell us a few more of, why is Evo my only choice at this point?
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, we've built a solution that is engineered top to bottom specifically for IT providers and managed service providers, managed security service providers, and resellers. So basically the channel, if you want to lump it all into one category. We've built it specifically for those entities to administer and deploy on behalf of all of their small and medium businesses, basically their customers. It's the first time that anybody's really taking that approach, and there was a huge gap in the market. And as we dug deeper and deeper and deeper, we realized that there were so many dead ends that enterprise solutions, they just weren't focusing on because it's just not part of their business model. And in order to truly serve the SMB and the MSP at the same time in the way that they should, they would have to retool a substantial portion of their products but also it would force them to go, quote unquote, down market. And that really isn't a strategic decision that a lot of them are willing to make. And so we've come in and we filled that gap, and we have a laundry list of differentiators that we've discovered and have built and then continue to build. But ultimately, I mentioned the purpose-built functionality for IT providers and for the SMB. We bridge that gap in a really seamless way. So it's extremely easy to administer for the IT provider. The way that we handle billing is, and licensing is automated. Everything is multi-tenant. It's just so simple. The way that we've constructed the configuration part, and it's also super easy for end users. So there are no confusing steps. Just you can only click one button. You scan your QR and you're set up. And then I think probably one of the bigger ones too is that a lot of enterprise solutions can get over $10, sometimes $15 per user per month, just for the baseline needs that a lot of SMBs have, and we're a fraction of that. So I think we've really tried to align ourselves with our market from every angle: cost, functionality, roadmap. We build everything based on feedback from the IT provider and their customers. So we're 100% all in on helping this market segment.
Michael, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Special thanks to you, David. Thank you for joining as well for the discussion. We'd like to thank all of our sponsors and all of our attendees that made this breakout session. We hope that you have a great rest of your day, and this will conclude the webcast.
Thank you, guys.